Okay, good evening. Good to be with you all. We're here tonight for another brief fellowship discussion, and you may get tired of us doing these, but Dad actually made a point earlier that's very good, and it gives a light to why we keep doing it. What was it like in the 80s and the 90s as far as fellowship conversations?
Well, there was a lectureship going on just about all the time that ended up allowing people to have fresh material, but it was constant.
It was constant. It's almost non-existent
Right
now. And so what he's referencing, like just to give everybody a notion of it, and this is 2nd John, a whole Denton lectureship. So you're going over to Denton, Texas. You're going to have Malcolm Hill in 1999 in Cookeville, Tennessee. They talked about every single school that you can think of between Malcolm and just everybody on staff. And then, of course, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you still had Ira Rice. So I think one of the things that you said, did Memphis used to give y'all every single paper?
Every paper.
Like they just put them out?
Absolutely.
So y'all, in school, you're getting informed by Memphis is giving you brotherhood papers to stay in the know. And right now, it's like the goal is to stay as uninformed as you possibly can. Everybody's answer is, I don't know. So this evening we have really just great moment, okay? Like, let me just throw this up here. Here's the first line. Don't lose focus for taking it personally. Now, could you just, I think I can zoom if you pay attention over here sometimes, like where our screen placement is. Look, I made this post earlier where Brian Kenyon, who is the director of the Florida School of Preaching, he's setting up his booth at Freed-Hardeman, and they're all so happy to be at Freed-Hardeman. And Richard Giles Massey, Richard Massey's down in Weatherford, is that correct? Weatherford, Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth. He's teaching again at the Brown Trail School of Preaching, and he liked that. And I saw that, and I just thought, this is unbelievable that there's, last year there were 4 Pepperdine speakers at Freed-Hardeman. This year there is 3, Bruce McClarty, Dale Maynor, Terry Gardner, Red River speaker, Red River Family Encampment, Chris McCurley, and 2 Sunset speakers, which are Dan Winkler and Phil Sanders. And it's just, for Richard Massey to like that, again, some might say, I don't know who Richard Massey is. So Johnny Ramsey is working the open forum at the Brown Trail Lectures, let's say late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s.
And Richard is going to the microphone.
They were basically having the discussion about North Richland Hills before it became terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Leroy Brownlow's daughter, I believe, was going there. And so it was like, okay, we're going to withdraw from Leroy. We're going to withdraw from them, and his daughter's still over there.
Yeah.
And so Johnny Ramsey comes up and said, well, I'm not sure one congregation can withdraw from another. Richard Massey goes to this open forum.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the mic. He says, I absolutely know that we can because we just did it.
So there's a forum happening about fellowship again. And Richard Massey is going to the microphone. The thing that basically everyone knows about Johnny Ramsey is he's like a walking memory bank. So he's got loads of Bible memorized, and Richard Massey just says, I don't care if it is Johnny Ramsey. I'm going to go to the microphone. I'm going to say this. You are out raising support, and basically you're getting what type of tip from Richard Massey?
Well, in the 90s, when I'm raising my initial, beginning support to go overseas, Richard basically finds out, and I never can think of the name of this congregation, but he finds out that I'm headed over there, and he just basically says, don't go over there. I was already scheduled to speak that night. Mm-hmm. He said, don't go there, come here. He was at Kennedale at the time. He said, we'll help you. And so, our friendship was formed right there. They did help me, been helping me ever since. That was 1990. And his sisters helped me, his mother helped me.
How old do you think you were at that time?
30 years old.
So you're 30 years old. And Richard Massey knows the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he says, look, you don't want to end up fellowshipping these folk, so come over here and we'll help you get what you need done. So here's my thing. Does everyone recognize what the post was about? My stories, let me just say my thing. I have had very little interaction with Richard Massey, but I will say this. The Weatherford congregation on 10 Top Road, they put me through the Tri-City School of Preaching. They were one of my primary supporters. I don't stop appreciating that right now, and I never will. We're just at these moments where we have to have these conversations.
Well, they've supported me. One of the gentlemen on there basically just said, I know that they helped your dad
Oh, yeah.
sometime.
Right.
30 years, tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes $10,000 at one time. Very, very generous. And, we were very, very close. Tilmon Bonner and Richard Massey, those are the two, staunchest of the elders that I worked with throughout the years. And so, and nobody is saying that this is over.
Right.
It's like, was Jason Rollo trying to get you to admit one way or the other if you were in or out of fellowship with him at one point?
When I saw Jason Rollo at Get Well Lectures, that was his thing. He was saying, are you in fellowship with me or not? And I said, yeah, I'm in spirit. I said, you're in Christ, I'm in Christ. I said, we're in fellowship. And my thing to him was, but y'all are acting like we never get to have a moment of correcting anything. And
even Jay Lockhart, with all of the stuff that we're dealing with Jay Lockhart, one of the times that I encountered him, he said, I am glad you came to me.
Right. And it was odd that, Jason was so unwilling to talk to me. And I said to him, hey, I just spent 90 minutes earlier this morning talking to Alan Hires in the library. So I can't imagine that we can't do the same thing. But all of that to say is, surely I think that everyone can recognize how strange it is for me when I see, man, Richard Massey is liking the stuff that goes on at Freed Hardeman, where they've got all these three Pepperdine speakers coming in. And, not even to mention that Brian Kenyon is just doing his thing.
And we're in a bit of a quandary about the like. There's been some back and forth today. And so, as Caleb, we have discussed this up one side and down the other. And particularly because, we would actually be fair to anybody, but we're trying to bend over with Richard.
Yeah.
Richard's 15 years older than me. He had cancer. I would say he had cancer when he was 65, somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
Never missed a step. And so just all kinds of things that go along with the friendship and whatnot. But, as I was looking at it, Caleb, it just ended up being, there's a moment there where lots of things have changed. Brian Kenyon, where would Brian Kenyon be in the big picture with Texas? Normally, I would say totally, possibly unknown. The dude's at Florida.
Yeah, we never talked about Florida when we were at Memphis.
And
it's just nothing we heard about.
We did not, unless they actually have some connection previously that I don't know about. Florida School of Preaching was just not a staple.
Yeah.
Well, now it is. And I hate to be this way, but this is how it is. That's where Terrence Dendy came from.
Right.
All of a sudden, that's a familiar face now, where before would it have been, when Brian Kenyon was at Portland in 2015, nobody knew him.
Yeah.
Right.
And what he's saying is, in some ways, it is easy to fly under the radar.
Oh, yeah.
Like when these conversations come up, and y'all know that because you only know one name, Max Lucado.
Yeah.
It's like everyone else flies under the radar if you're not Max Lucado. And so this is the scene, okay? But I want what we're doing right now, and another thing that you said about Richard did have cancer. He's like 15 years older than you. And Richard is going to clear himself, right? And we're going to definitely want to give the opportunity and make it known that Richard is going to clear himself out of this, of his own mouth. But I do want to say this, I'm 30, and I just keep hearing from these older men, look, if y'all aren't going to do the job, you're going to have to get out of the way, because Richard is still teaching at Brown Trail. You can't get to keep like these offices where you don't keep up. When I saw Michael White at Get Well, he just told me, I just got to tell you, I don't keep up like I used to. And we'll have another quote where apparently, Richard's assistant says he doesn't keep up.
Richard doesn't keep up.
Right. The assistant is saying about Richard, he doesn't know what's going on. And then Gary Summers had said to you not long ago, I don't keep up like I used to. Translation, you don't care. But you can't just keep blocking young guys who want to try to do something, who are, just watching what's going on, and then your excuse is, I don't know. And, Jason Rollo is not in the old guy category, but that's what he said to me. He said, I don't know what they do out of Pepperdine. I just know it's a school in California. No way. He knows more than that. But here's the thing. Don't lose focus for taking it personally. Everyone loves Richard. Richard is going to get to clear himself. This is the issue. It is very unfortunate to say it this way, but it is what it is. We have this circle, this party within the Texas-Tennessee brotherhood of these upper echelon individuals who just think the rules don't apply to them, and they put it on you. And Jeff Jenkins and Jay Lockhart are two of those people. Now, really, 2015, it all got stirred up over noticing J. Lockhart.
Yeah.
Like, it just really kind of rose up, in, I would say, in your thinking, like, wait a minute, J. Lockhart is coming in? Why is that so alarming in 2015?
Well, in my opinion, as far as the sound brethren were concerned, we were talking about the 80s a minute ago, Caleb. In the 80s, J. Lockhart was put to bed as a liberal. Just, that's it. Everybody looked at him in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
He was using Lynn Anderson.
Okay,
Lynn Anderson, are we going there?
we will.
All right, so we're going to talk about Lynn Anderson later, and J. Lockhart's still using Lynn Anderson on the air after Lynn Anderson made one of the worst boggles that he could make, and also was marked himself as early as 73. And so here's a guy that was just totally outside of our circles. Next thing you know, he's everywhere.
Right. Now, when you said that a minute ago, you said, by the 80s, he's out.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. He's messing around, fellowshipping Lynn Anderson, and everyone just took note of it. So what he just said was, when people like Richard were taking part in the open forums at Fort Worth, help me with that, Brown Trail, and then the Denton lectures, everybody was in agreement, J. Lockhart's out. But now somehow, like you just said, 2015, he came back in. So here's the quote, just so everyone knows about, well, what's wrong with Lynn Anderson? This is what Alan Hires quoted Lynn Anderson. Everyone remember this? Here we go with a little bit of audio. Yes.
My friend Lynn Anderson was here. He made a statement during that meeting that I think probably came back to haunt him. He referred to the church as a big, sick denomination. And
okay, that's what got everybody's bell rung.
Now, everybody's heard that.
Yeah.
I'm saying people that are in their 40s, let's say for sure 50s, they all know somebody said it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them may not remember it's Lynn Anderson. He just put a time signature on it. First time in my lifetime I ever heard
that he said in 73.
That's right.
Yeah.
That and the context too, that they were being marked.
Right.
Everybody's pulling their money from Herald of Truth, and he actually made that statement. So that's Lynn Anderson. They were talking about them speaking in tongues at Highland Church of Christ in Abilene during that meeting. That's the whole thing. And so it's really unconscionable, is it not? With all of that being said, all these people out of fellowship with Lynn Anderson and J. Lockhart just does what he wants to do. And somehow or other, he manages to get back in.
Yeah, and so he had, what was it? Jay had his own television broadcast, and he was bringing Lynn Anderson onto it.
In Tyler, Texas, which would definitely be in the area where Richard and all of the brethren, I was in that area as well, all of us knew about it.
Yeah. So what this moment comes down to is, Alan Hires just said, in 1973 Memphis meeting, we were discussing against a man named Lynn Anderson who said the Church of Christ is a big, sick denomination. Move years down the line, and J. Lockhart is bringing Lynn Anderson back in. And so then everybody collectively says, we're done with Jay. We're done with J. Lockhart. He's trying to bring Lynn Anderson back in.
And so, by the way, Lynn Anderson was in Dallas. It's not like he disappeared in 1973. Once he left Highland, he came to Dallas. He's in the Preston Road Church of Christ, and that's where he was when and Preston Road was basically outside the fellowship circle, and that's where he was when J. Lockhart had him.
Well, then someone says, okay, well, if he's put out back in the 80s, how does he begin to resurface? So here's a note. This is the Oklahoma Christian Lectureship lineup from 2012, and you're going to have this here. It's going to have J. Lockhart, 62nd Annual, Dr. Harold Shank, Pepperdine, Steve Clower, and you keep going down. On Tuesday, down here at the bottom, let's try to step out to a side a little bit. On Tuesday, Dr. J. Lockhart will bring 5 sessions on preachers preaching from Ephesians. So if you're preaching on Ephesians, at some point you're going to hit Ephesians 5:11 that says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. And who else is going to be there while J. Lockhart is there? A cappella vocal group. But that's not it. Let's go over one. Here's an more exact lineup, and this is from Stafford North. Stafford North says, J. Lockhart will teach all day Tuesday about preaching from Ephesians. Number 10, on Monday and Tuesday, Royce Money will be there, and they will teach classes on marriage. Tuesday is the day that J. Lockhart is preaching. Royce Money from Abilene Christian University is
former president,
Pepperdine man. He's going to be there. And then number 14, well-known singing group a cappella will be there, and J. Lockhart corrects none of these individuals. Now, that's the focus. And you might be saying, what's up with this picture, he and Jeff Jenkins? J. Lockhart freely comes into Freed-Hardeman. He is clearly in fellowship with all these people while he fellowships a cappella. Years ago, he tried to bring Lynn Anderson back in, and he fellowships Royce Money. All this is the focus. There is a circle behind the scenes absolutely pulling the wool over y'all's eyes. And this is where we come in and say, why are the sound and the conservative brethren not sounding any alarms? Because it's just clearly there. You look at it, it's right there. And we're not getting anything. The people who keep contacting me about the Alan Hires interview, I think that they do this because they you're not going to hurt my feelings, but they basically do this. They call me and they say, Caleb, the Alan Hires interview was fantastic, well put together, on and on and on. But then they all get to this moment. He kind of contradicted himself on fellowship at the end, and I'm saying there's no kind of to it.
They kind of think that it's going to offend you.
Yeah.
Because they hold it to the last. And it's like, Caleb, this is that moment where you actually say something about these interviews. People are saying you and Rube Shelley are in fellowship because you sat down and got the hard stuff on the table and can still be congenial.
Right. And
the same thing with Alan Hires. You got the hard stuff on the table.
Rubel knew exactly who I was when we made that arrangement. I told him exactly who I was, what I do. He told me, he said, don't get yourself messed up fooling with me. And I said, well, if I were you, I would not tell people that I'm going to be doing it. I said, because they'll hear my name and tell you not to do it. And then we both said, well, we don't care what any of those people think. But I did that interview so that y'all could see from his perspective what I'm saying right now. There's this circle like the Wizard of Oz. There's these people behind the curtains, and they're just doing what they want. And they put all this doctrine and burden on you, and the individuals would be Jeff Jenkins and J. Lockhart.
Let's move this outside of a conspiracy theory. Listen, y'all. J. Lockhart was on the board at Freed-Hardeman for 20 years. He resigned in the last 5 years. His wife was sick. He resigned. Jeff Jenkins is on the board. These guys are the picture of what goes on behind the scenes. You might say, well, that's Freed-Hardeman. That's not them. Listen, J. Lockhart brags about being included in meetings where presidents are. If he's a board member and Milton Sewell is, going to the president's meeting, these school presidents, it'd be nothing for J. Lockhart to get to be involved in that.
Right.
And so I'm saying these guys are shakers and movers behind. I mean, how many of them? Who's on Red River? Chris McCurley's on the board at Red River. Who's on Lads to Leaders? You got Glenn Colley is in and out of these different places. These guys, Lake Tahoe. Some people say Lake Tahoe is so far out. Who did I tell you is on Lake Tahoe?
Was it Bruce or was it someone else?
It was the past Bible department head that I never can think of his name. Ralph Gilmore. Yeah. And it's like, no, this never ends.
Yeah, and it just isn't difficult either. That's why I said at the beginning, it's like in fashion to be ignorant, when in fact this is not hard at all. And people were doing it back in the day very easily. So,
well, it is amazing to say 20 years ago, which would be 2004 at this point. 2004. Yeah. Everybody, when we sat down and talked about the current affairs, everybody knew Red River Encampment. They all knew Tahoe, and they paid attention to who was on those. Oklahoma Christian, they paid attention. It just isn't is it the older guys just got old and they, don't, I don't know.
It didn't just happen. Collectively, everyone got old. I tend to think they were all doing it anyway. Maybe. Just have this moment, y'all. This is from the interview, what Alan Hires says about Lynn Anderson. That's old Barrett Baxter. Do you think that's confusing?
Probably.
That a month ago we were saying these people can't be fellowshipped. We're going to cut the funds to their program, but now I'm going to go share the pulpit with them in fellowship.
By the way, a couple of years before he died, Lynn Anderson came to see me.
Okay.
Came to our house here in Henderson. And he was with great-grandson of T.B. Larimore, who's another friend. And I took them to Stantonville, Tennessee, to the grave of Larimore's mother. And they'd never been there. Didn't know it was there. One of them, it was his great-great-grandmother. But anyway, I thought Lynn moderated some in his later years. I could be mistaken about that, but that was my feeling.
Okay, well, that would be a question of, when he came to visit you, I didn't know, would you think you'd be able, the question would be, if you can't worship and work with Lynn Anderson, how could you have that company with him when he came to see you?
Well, he knocked on my door.
And just said, can you take us up here?
Well, he just...
That's my thing. I still appreciate Alan giving me 90 minutes. His wife came in and she said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go see my grandbabies. That's something. I recognize they gave me time that they did not have to. They had other things to do. But this is just the statement in the interview. Alan Hires said, I kept company with Lynn Anderson after the 1973 Memphis meeting, after he called the Church of Christ a big, sick denomination. And that is exactly...
He was marked and withdrawn from...
Clearly.
In 1973, after that meeting, they took all the money from these brethren over here.
Right.
East of the Mississippi. West of the Mississippi as
and
well.
So 2 Thessalonians 3:14 that we all know, if any man obey not our word by this epistle, note that man have no company with him. But then Alan Hires said, well, he just showed up to my house and I did it. Just had this whole outing with him. And so
put this in there, Caleb. They all went to school together at Freed
Oh,
Hardeman.
yeah. 1955 was a busy year at Freed Hardeman. Alan Hires was there. Malcolm Hill was a student there. Doug McClish was a student there. Lynn Anderson was a student there. And John Allen Chalk, who...
Did you say Jerry Rushford?
No, I don't know about that one.
Jerry Rushford was in there, too.
And so all of these men go to school together, and I get that. But I don't. Someone says, we went to school together, and that's our bond. No, my bond is in Christ, not the alma mater. And that's what we're all seeing. And so this moment of where I'm saying, don't start taking it personal about Richard. This is the spotlight.
And this is really what we're saying, too. This association that Caleb is talking about, you all would say, they were all together in school. Look, we have the same kind of ties with different individuals, and the fact that we're talking about them, you can't make it the case that we haven't talked to them also. I met with J. Lockhart. Caleb is meeting with Alan as we're talking about this. And what do you think the reason behind what do you think people think the reason behind your interview with him was? It's to get at the bottom of what went on with Rubel Shelley.
Yeah.
Why would a person with the sound background that Rubel Shelley had, why would they take off? Well, if we're saying today, if we're looking at the politics today,
Yeah.
is it enough to make you leave?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes us feel that we're on the outside, and we're really not on the outside. We're the individuals that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We're still saying the exact same things. I mean, you can pick up Global Music's book, Behold the Pattern. We're there.
Right. I mean, that's what you were saying. You would have had a number of help. And really what it is exactly that's the second reason you said you get the second part of the Rubel story with Alan Hires. Once I found the Memphis meeting, that was like the thing. What everybody has done right now is all of our lectureships in our schools have gotten so bloated that there's no room to maneuver. And so anytime anybody thinks about doing the right thing, they immediately start thinking, well, my buddy is going to be with that school and my buddy's going to be at this lectureship. So that's why, like you said, we used to have loads of help. And now there's just nothing, and that's why. Because everybody's going to be touching somebody other, at a lectureship or some event. And that's where I said also, y'all act like we live and die by lectureships. I mean, the church would survive without lectureships.
And if we don't do something, the church is not going to survive as we know it. I mean, this is exactly how the church becomes a denomination. You're actually fast forwarding into what happened in the second decade, first and second decade of the 1900s, y'all, where the Christian church ended up morphing out of the Church of Christ. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what you're seeing right now, is these guys just continue, and I'm not saying Alan Hires per se, but I am definitely saying, which we're saying Alan Hires is playing a part in this. He continues to use J. Lockhart on the spiritual sword.
Spiritual sword.
When you look at the spiritual sword and you say all this stuff J. Lockhart's doing, he's in lockstep with Oklahoma Christian, with Stafford North before he died. He and Stafford North were teaching on the master's program at Bear Valley. Mm-hmm. They were let go. They didn't just get to be fired, but they became damage, collateral damage, and they were no longer used over there. But J. Lockhart was not ever going to leave Oklahoma Christian. It didn't matter if Royce Money was there, Acapella was there. And the funny thing, Caleb, none of these individuals know that J. Lockhart was opposed to them. I am not involved with Acapella. I don't have anything to do with acapella, but I am in fellowship with Stafford North.
Yeah. So
Wait a minute.
let's let him say it so that they know.
Does this not go to the how many degrees that you have to be? I mean,
Right.
just count. See if you can count this, because you can't dissect this degree.
Know me.
Well, brother, we actually know you a little bit better than you think that we do, because we're seeing who you're running around with.
I just told you running around with is what I resent, and I want that stopped.
So
I don't remember the last time I saw Royce Money, and so don't say I'm running around with Royce Money or with acapella or any of that, because it's a lie.
no, it in fact is the truth.
Okay? And so here's what you just heard. Jay Lockhart does not want it to be said that he's in fellowship with Royce Money. He does not want it to be said that he's in fellowship with acapella, but you will find him at all the events where Royce Money was and where acapella was. Now let me ask Alan Hires if that is confusing or not. Because in 1973, when they all were marking the Herald of Truth characters, but then they'd still go to lectureships with them, I said...
Which was Lynn Anderson.
Lynn Anderson. I said, what? Don't you think that was confusing? Listen to this.
I'm opposed to the piano, and they brought it in. I just never get to sing again. So they'd have to move their membership. So, well, I wanted that one, and then back on that idea of one of the things from the Herald of Truth Memphis meeting. When you said the non-institutionals, they'd get to have their meetings with people they disagreed with, and I asked, would that be a bit confusing for the people in the pew? One of the things that I looked at was Thomas Warren was a speaker, and Baxter was a speaker, Lynn Anderson was a speaker. Rubel Shelley was at the meeting, I believe. I don't know if he spoke. He was at Whitehaven. But y'all had the meeting in September. And Ira Rice, in his paper, he was totally calling for cut their funds, cut Herald of Truth funds up. But then a month later in October, Thomas Warren and Rubel went to speak on the lectureship at Lubbock with Lynn Anderson and Batzel Barrett Baxter. Do you think that's confusing? That
Probably.
That a month ago we were saying these people can't be fellowshipped. We're going to cut the funds to their program.
Probably.
That a month ago, Batzel Barrett Baxter. Do you think that's confusing?
Probably.
That a month ago, Batzel Barrett Baxter. Do you think that's confusing?
Probably.
So, and again, you know, Alan Hires wrote the book, How Do You Spell Fellowship, where he was responding to Rubel Shelley. And so when I say, in 1973, Thomas Warren marks Herald of Truth, but then he goes and shares the pulpit with him. Isn't that confusing? And even Alan Hires says that's probably confusing to people.
This is not a I got you moment that Alan Hires would not have been looking for. This interview is called Candid Christian Series. This is where we sit down and we don't do fluffy.
Right. And that's...
We're getting to the meat of what is going on, and you young guys that are just gnawing on us, do you not realize that people like Alan Hires are actually allowing this to be done?
And so, like when you said that, it's called Candid Christian. It's not softball. If it were softball, then 2,000 people wouldn't have watched it by now. The reason that y'all are watching it is because we're having the real conversation.
Is it the case that your video with Rubel Shelley is the highest volume YouTube video that Rubel Shelley is in his entire career?
Yes. On YouTube, when you type in Rubel Shelley, my interview with him is going to have the most views of any video he has. Because it is detailed, it is candid, it touches the issues. And I would tell you this, y'all don't care where Rubel Shelley was born. It's like if I came and said, where were you born? We're talking about the things that matter. And I want to say this again because you said about young guys gnawing on me. I did the interview for young guys. I did the interview so the young guys could see the politics, both sides. Alan is saying it's probably confusing the way that politics goes. It is very confusing. And I'm doing it for the young guys who are trying to maneuver their way through because they're going to have this political system on their back.
I would like to say something about perspective as far as numbers are concerned. There's a guy named Arthur Pink. Arthur Pink had a newsletter with 1,000 people on his subscription list. You can't find an older Baptist that doesn't know who Arthur Pink is and or probably has his books. He would be similar to the Foy Wallace in the Church of Christ. Yeah. He has a set of books, and these guys that are rabid, if they're Calvinists, they have them.
Right.
1,000 people on his newsletter. That interview is at 1.6 now. It's a matter of counting.
For Alan?
Yes.
1.7.
And 1.7, and the one where we talk about it behind the scenes is at 1,000. Mm-hmm. So people are looking at this to see what is going on here.
So do you see the picture, the real picture? Like, don't start taking it personal when we put up Brian Kenyon. Like, these are just the ones who they need to stop stop fellowshipping with the real problematic people like J. Lockhart. Lynn Anderson is
Brian
dead.
Kenyon actually told me in 2015 that he was not going to use J. Lockhart anymore.
And that's after you did Portland.
That's right. And
from the pulpit.
And we're talking statistics, we're giving like you're doing here, all of the information that is hard-hitting and you can't deny it. And, you know, it was a very, I'd never met him before. He comes up, he's basically there raising money at Portland. That's what he was doing there. I didn't know about J. Lockhart. But he and J. Lockhart, do you think he would say at this point, I didn't know J. Lockhart was at Freed-Hardeman?
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I mean,
Well, he knows it now.
he knows it now. And
And I'm not saying that he won't do something about it.
that's true.
He
But
said that last time.
I will say this, though. Everybody knows the history of Freed-Hardeman. Freed-Hardeman is the mixing pot. When we were at Memphis, we weren't even required to go to a lecture. We just had to show up to the school building. And I had a Memphis grad contact me today. He said same thing. He said when we went, we just had to sign a sheet of paper that said, I arrived. He said didn't have to go anything.
When James Ofoot was there, the quote that he made from Curtis was, do we have to go to class? Which one of those liberals are going to go here?
Yeah.
Stay in the library.
So now, let me do this. These aren't like the spotlight. When you say Lynn Anderson, well, Lynn Anderson's dead. And you say J. Lockhart. J. Lockhart was out. He slid back in. Jeff Jenkins wants to bring him back in all over again. This was last year. Freed-Hardeman had 4 Pepperdine speakers. Here they are. Dale Maynor, Bruce McClarty, Noel Whitlock, and David Skidmore. We said this year, what they have, the new, call it this way, the new Lynn Andersons, they got Dale Maynor again, Pepperdine, Bruce McClarty, Pepperdine, Terry Gardner, Pepperdine, Chris McCurley, Red River Family Encampment. They use Orpheus Hayward. Look up Orpheus Hayward and see what y'all think.
Same year on Pepperdine.
Same year on Pepperdine. You got Dan Winkler down at Sunset. Sunset historically has been out of fellowship for false doctrine on marriage and divorce, false doctrine on the Holy Spirit. Phil Sanders speaking on Sunset with Dan Winkler. So this is what you have. You have this behind the curtain. You have the circle of individuals who think that the rules just don't apply to us. And I'm saying in the same fashion as J. Lockhart bringing Lynn Anderson on the television broadcast, and then Alan, Alan Hires volunteered that story on the interview. What can I do about that? He volunteered that he kept company with Lynn Anderson years after the Memphis meeting.
Well, can I say this, Caleb? Some of the young men, look, listen, we're saying to you, we don't really have any ought with you, but what we are saying is these are the big money venues.
Oh, yeah.
You will never, unless you're Wes McAdam, and you start moving in those circles, Jacob Rutledge, I don't know exactly how they moved into those circles, but unless you become as liberal as they are, you're not going to get into these big money events like Red River Encampment. This is a major, Lake Tahoe, this is a major endeavor.
Right.
It's so far above, the things you might benefit from something like with Lads to the Leaders. Lads to the Leaders is a major event you'll never see the board of directors. I don't know why people don't look for things like that to just see who the shakers and the movers are.
There's loads of it. And I mean, all we're doing is just giving you a conversation and then a handful of people there. Essentially, when you get mad at these conversations, you're telling us, I would have rather not known that. And you're making me feel bad, which is to what he said a moment ago. It's like we don't even get to operate by our conscience. We put out this information. I don't like being close to the politics at all. It is disgusting, and I'm trying to help the young guys, and then people just say, we'd rather not know.
Well, Caleb, you blazed by, and I'm not saying anything about that. It's just so much information. But when he said David Skidmore, y'all should have fainted. Everybody that's listening or ever will listen to this should just gasp and try to gather your breath, because David Skidmore is on with Jeff Walling. I'm saying he is in a ministry with Jeff Walling at Pepperdine. He was at Freed-Hardeman last year, and the year before that, or maybe even the same year, but for sure the year before that, he was at Winterfest with Jeff Walling. Is there anybody out there that doesn't know Winterfest is a bad word? You may not know what's going on at Winterfest, but you'll basically say, I wouldn't want to go there.
So, that's one of the things that I said to both Alan and Rubel in the interview is people buy books, they don't read them.
Yeah.
Preaching school students, they love to buy up the lectureship books, they don't read them. because if they were reading these, they'd be hearing Winterfest is outside. You know, these are newer in hardback, but these are Living Oracles by Malcolm Hill.
Nashville Jubilee.
Yeah, Nashville Jubilee, Tulsa Workshop. So let's do it. We're going to start winding down. We're running out of our time. I want to let Richard clear himself. So when I made that post, I said 3 Pepperdine speakers on FHU, and Richard Massey, of all people, is giving it a thumbs up. Well, Richard came on only, I'd say maybe like an hour after I made the post, and this is what he said. He said, actually, I have been in and out of used cars all morning trying to buy a car for my wife. I didn't know I had pressed the like button. We did support the Robertsons for many years. We supported Caleb when he attended Tri-City School of Preaching. Thanks for word from others for me. I was actually talking to Tyler Hill this week about colleges that had left the truth and the damage that they are doing. And so I did have to say to him, Richard, I hear you about getting in and out of the car today, but you liked this post 2 days ago, not today. So he can't say, well, I was fumbling with my phone getting out of the car. This happened 2 days ago. And then he says, whenever it happened, I did not hit a like button on purpose. And what does he mean by that? He's saying, I don't like the bad fellowship with Pepperdine and Sunset and Red River Encampment that's coming out of Freed-Hardeman. And he says, these colleges have left the truth. So, hey.
Here's somebody that you wouldn't believe that would say that. Jay Lockhart said basically the same thing. He told me when I went down to talk to him about these kinds of things. You have it?
Oh, yes.
He actually said, Freed-Hardeman
is one of the last bastons. Freed-Hardeman is one of the last bastons for being on the right track.
Yeah, you said again.
And we got to keep.
Oh, he's not an employee. Is he not there?
Yeah, he's there.
Okay. Oh, he's not an employee.
Yes, he's on the faculty. But I'm saying if he is off to the left and we know about it, we'll not renew his contract. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Freed-Hardeman is one of the last bastons for being on the right track.
Yeah. He says there, thank you for coming.
And we got to keep it that way.
Yeah. Well, you see my difficulty though when you got brethren that on the one hand say he's a change agent, then turn right around and their next preacher is from Freed-Hardeman, and everybody goes to Freed-Hardeman with Ralph Kilmore. That ends up making me confused. Well, I wanted to get the question about Royce Money, and
I appreciate your coming to me because a lot of times we do everything but talk to the person that we need to be talking to.
We don't get credit for any of this, y'all. But you heard him say, thank you, I appreciate you coming to me.
Now, one of the things that he also say, and let me just ask him, is there any way that we can just pipe into our live stream? Like while this is already recording, do you think? We can? Okay. So let's just go ahead and do that because we still have enough, and that's fine, right? You own the hour. It's not a big deal. So they're going to work on that, and we'll just keep doing our thing. But what is the difference, and why does Jay Lockhart get to say it's the last bastion of soundness? He reduced it down to 1. There's like 17, as they say, brotherhood schools. And he said, no. Henderson, down to 1. Now, why can't I just say, not even the 1? How is that just astronomical? And he just cut out Abilene. He cut out Lipscomb. He cut out Oklahoma. He cut out York. Like some of these schools, I don't even know what that is.
So when you really get down to this is so amazing, Caleb. You interviewed Alan Hires, and he only cut 3 loose, did he not?
He said, the one that he left out, he said, Lipscomb, he said, Pepperdine is gone, Abilene is gone, and then he said, and now Lipscomb is gone, but he didn't even mention Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Or Harding.
Which he's not going to mention Harding, I don't think, because his affection for Bruce McClarty.
Well, you'll have a load of Pepperdine speakers coming into Harding. Are we good? Yep. Okay, fantastic.
And,
Thank you, guys.
Not only that, I haven't said this, I didn't say this, I don't think in the other, maybe I did. It's the idea of if you live in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, particularly, and some of the other states, but particularly those, the heartache, Caleb, associated with parents that children wanted to go to Harding and they let them, and then they get to Harding and they basically turn into liberals that can barely, most of them, a lot of them, 10 years later were not in fellowship with their own parents and their grandparents. It is ridiculous to turn a blind eye at all of the heartache, I'm saying the pain and heartache That's where I'm from. It's Texas, right? Texarkana.
So the only thing that a variation of it, what people would have to do to get a glimpse of what you just said. You said people who are not in like the Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas are not going to understand Harding in the 80s and the 90s. Well, if you will read Jimmy Allen's autobiography, then he's going to tell you Mike Cope was working at the college congregation when they were making their big change, and Jimmy Allen just said, hey, he said, I like Mike Cope and I like Rubel Shelley more than I like these other guys, but I don't agree with them. And that was the scene. And so
Mike Cope went on to be the director of the Pepperdine Lectureship.
After Jerry Rushford. And that's again where I say, there is a circle in these institutions, a circle of people behind and y'all keep saying it. So here's the thing. Y'all keep saying, I don't know who these people are. Well, when I start saying, well, they're behind a curtain and they're pulling all the strings, then that's when you should start saying, we don't know who these people are. What? Well, you could. And once you started looking at them, you would see they are pulling the strings. So he said, it's the, let's make one more quote from him too, because he does something himself that he doesn't like. He says to Dad one day, Freed Hardeman is the last sound school that we have. But listen to what he says that he doesn't like. Here we go.
Prove them publicly for it. Is that what you're saying?
Either reprove them publicly or go to them and do whatever you're wanting to do. But even still, I would say you still need to do it.
When you guys do that, you go right ahead and print stuff that is untrue. After Johnny talked to me, he had me on his Facebook, and what he was saying was exactly what he said before he talked to me, so it didn't do me any good to talk to him.
Well, because your position is still the same, and we're showing our brotherhood that you are in fact in line with Stafford North, who's bringing in Royce money and acapella, and you didn't oppose it.
What I am opposed to is people like you that think all of our schools are gone, that nobody's faithful but you guys. What I am opposed to is people like you that think all of our schools are gone, that nobody's faithful but you guys.
Now, wait a minute. That's exactly what he just said about Freed Hardeman. No, he said, no one's faithful but us. We're the last bastion of soundness. And then he tells on the phone, I don't like when people do that. And that's where I say,
The only school that's still on track was his exact quote about Freed Hardeman.
now, this is the station. I've gotten a notification. We are streaming live. So they'll pick us up. Now, again, let's go backwards. Does everybody see this? Richard Massey absolutely cleared himself. He said about the colleges, they have left the truth and they are doing damage. Richard Massey, he says, whatever it was, I did not hit the like button on purpose, so he does not like what's happening at Freed Hardeman. But now I do want to make this turn. Can we have a moment too and just say this? They haven't seen us yet. We're doing YouTube, but we're also doing television. So we're up, but he'll figure it out. Now, yes.
The thing that was said by one of the young preachers on the Facebook, that's where a lot of this is coming from today, in the Facebook comments on your post about Richard. One of the young guys said, Richard doesn't know what's going on at Freed Hardeman. Can I tell you something? You have no idea what you're talking about. Richard Massey has forgotten more than you will ever know about Freed Hardeman. And sometimes when you're our age, it takes a bit of jogging to make you realize or to just bump those memory banks, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, if I like that, if I hit the like button, let me tell you, I am going to make sure that I am not categorizing myself with people that I have actually made it clear throughout the years that I do not want anybody to think that the Lord's church is of their making. That's basically what took place, and I think Richard deserves to hear that.
And just this moment, we really want to let it happen, let it be known that he's clearing himself. We're going to have some conversation in just a moment. These guys all start making a quibble about the like button. Well, Richard just said, hey, I didn't want to do it, so there's no quibble to that.
And can you see why?
Right.
With all this kind of information in the background that he would have in his lifetime?
And you're saying, giving some people some room and whatnot. You can get on social media, and there's plenty of things that different people do that are not like the lectureship scene. And like if they're having a picnic with their family, I'll hit the like button. And someone might say, well, that's odd, that you would hit the like button on Bruce McClarty when he's out like getting donuts. He's got his mom and he's going out and getting donuts. If I don't, then y'all say I hate him. And so it's like, he's taking his mom to get donuts. That's nice, right?
I don't care about the Jenkins coffee.
Oh, yeah. Anyway. But it's like these things that they do in their personal life and whatever, and they enjoy their grandbabies. They're people. I love them. God loves them. But when we start having this conversation about doctrine and fellowship, and then everyone starts pulling out the card, well, he's a good man. I'm sure he's a good husband. No one's saying any of that. But now let's do this. You have anything else?
Not at that moment.
This really, I'm saying, y'all, Richard absolutely cleared himself. Richard, of his own statement, he said, I did not do it. The schools have left the truth and they're doing damage. But we do have to now have this conversation. In one side of the conversation, all Richard did was incriminate a handful of buddies. When Brian Kenyon was the centerpiece of that whole discussion, Richard liked Brian Kenyon's post of, we're happy to be at Freed-Hardeman where they have the lectureship or the Pepperdine speakers on their lectureship. Well, now that Richard has come out and said the colleges have left the truth and they're doing damage to the church, we're now having to look at Terrence Brownlow Dendy at the Texas School of Preaching because Terrence Dendy was educated at the Florida School of Preaching. And the problem that we consistently have run into is men are unwilling to stand up for the truth for fear of hurting the feelings of their alma mater. And Terrence was educated at Florida School of Preaching.
And Bear Valley.
And that was the next one was, this goes back months ago where Terrence and the Texas School of Preaching, they were really, they're beating up on Brad Harrop and Jack Wilkie about alcohol. When Earl Edwards holds the exact same position as Brad Harrop and Jack Wilkie on alcohol, and Earl Edwards was teaching Terrence Dendy at Bear Valley. Why doesn't he take that same argumentation and put it on Earl Edwards? Now.
Earl Edwards is still around. He's an elder at the Finger congregation. You could still make that same argument and include him in. If you're going to take Brad Harrop, just include him in. And
that's where I go back to young guys in the politics. Why is it that Terrence was so ready to look, Brad Harrop, he can have his reputation and whatnot that he wants to have. He's not going to be as big as Earl Edwards, okay? No. So to the young guys, I say, why was Terrence so ready to beat up on Brad? And he won't give it to Earl Edwards.
And can I correct something? I just left this out. When I said J. Lockhart was totally out, except with Bear Valley. Yeah. They continued to be with him when he was in Benton, Kentucky. You'll see Denny Petrillo right there in together with a training program that they had going on over there. So what does that have to do with Terrence? J. Lockhart was on the same faculty as Earl Edwards.
Yeah, at Bear Valley.
At Bear Valley.
So you get that? Why? But here's what has happened. Richard is obviously in the Texas scene with Texas School of Preaching, in tight with, Jason Rollo is the director of that school, let's all be honest. Jason Rollo is the director of the Texas School of Preaching, and this is what they're going to run into. If Richard Massey, who is currently faculty at Brown Trail, is going to say the colleges have left the truth and they're doing damage to the brotherhood, then why is Brown Trail still messing with them? Why is Southwest School of Preaching setting up their booth at Freed-Hardeman? Why is Brian Kenyon happy to be at Freed-Hardeman where they've got Pepperdine speakers and nobody saying anything? House to house, heart to heart's there. Alan Webster couldn't pull that. Alan Webster, as the editor of House to House, can't say, look, y'all got Pepperdine speakers, we're not coming. Polishing the pulpit, got a big board up there. Look, if y'all are doing Pepperdine speakers, we're not coming. Y'all can't do that because Richard Massey now is saying the colleges have left the truth and they're doing damage to the brotherhood. So basically what we just had is a statement from Richard to Jason Rollo and Terrence Dendy at the Texas School of Preaching. Are y'all talking? And here's my thing. Why is it the case that Brian Kenyon puts his stuff on public Facebook and Terrence Dendy can't say anything publicly? No.
Do you love these guys? I'm saying enough of saying if you say something, you don't love people. I mean, you heard J. Lockhart say to me, I appreciate you for coming to me. He was aggravated with me later But the reason he's aggravated is because he crossed himself. Behind the scenes, different ones say different things. That's the only reason he was aggravated with me, because he saw on my Facebook that I didn't change what I'd said because he demonstrated the exact same thing that we're saying. But here's the thing. If you don't care about these guys, then just continue to let them go off to the left. I mean, seriously, when you're thinking, when your wife and you are talking about these people that you've had this fellowship with and you love them, and don't you think that Brian Kenyon needs some encouragement? I'm saying Brian Kenyon came to me after that sermon and just flat said, I did not know these things about J. Lockhart. We won't be using him anymore.
It also wouldn't be that big a deal if everybody would straighten up together. Right? It's like someone says, oh, my buddy's over here, my buddy's over there. Well, it's like, well, if y'all all just kind of quit Freed-Hardeman at the same time, then that issue would fix itself.
How are we going to make a living is what's in their mind. Many of their minds.
Yeah.
And y'all, listen, that's not a dig or a slap. We are preachers. We all know what it's like to have to deal with what a lot of people don't have to deal with. And that is, if you start speaking up, you get put out. But can I tell you something? Caleb, are we doing fine?
Yes, we're doing fine.
We are doing fine. It's just, it is unbelievable the fear factor that comes into play. And, you know, I've had a preacher, I've had a director of the school, a lead teacher in the school. It was Curtis Cates and Garland Elkins. Basically, Garland never said a word in this conversation, but Curtis Cates and Ivy Powell gave me down the road for speaking up at the lectureship at Brown Trail over the people that they were using that were involved with Tulsa Workshop. And, you know, it got back to them that I had said certain things about Brother Elkins going out to the West Coast lectures. And, you know, Brother Elkins, to his credit, he actually said, maybe I shouldn't have gone. Curtis called me a radical. And Ivy said, you'll not ever be on any lectureships like this. Ivy apologized later. New Year's Day resolution, calls me up and said, I know you're not a liberal. I know you're not a radical. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
You know, this thing all can come around where people get better. And I know that you all don't want to go through that kind of stuff. But hey, what are you going to do when you get older?
So, a note on that. Ivy came back around and he said, you know, he says, I was incorrect on that. You're not a liberal. Who told you, like in that, you know, kind of Michael Hatcher crowd, who told you years later that you were actually correct on Curtis Cates? And
David Brown.
Yeah, David Brown said it. So, that's really nothing. You know, it's just like, that's a moment ago, one of our producers hates the saying, it is what it is. But we just say, look, we were wrong, you know, back when.
And the reason David Brown didn't know it, what was being said, is because I didn't just, you know, build a castigation, that was my cause against Curtis Cates. We were trying to work through certain things. I was behind the scenes. And so later on, Curtis was possibly dead at that point. I believe he was. When I was discussing with
David Brown?
David Brown.
Yeah, then yes.
So,
he would have been dead already. And so, this is where we are. This is where I say, yeah, and you got to say it too, man. How many schools in Texas did we already have? And then they started another one. So you got Brown Trail, you got Southwest, now we've got the Texas School of Preaching, and Texas School of Preaching basically was birthed by Florida School of Preaching, and Florida School of Preaching goes to Freed-Hardeman, and Pepperdine comes to Freed-Hardeman, and Sunset comes to Freed-Hardeman, and Red River and Camet comes to Freed-Hardeman, and nobody can do anything because everybody's buddy is connected to all this. And so here's another one. Let's scoot over to the side a little bit because I can only do so much with this. So Richard Massey, he just says, the colleges have left the truth and they are doing damage to the church, and I have to say, I'm glad to let Richard clear himself on the whole like button thing, but all he did do was incriminate fellow Brown Trail staff and faculty, because Focal Point is announcing this year, they said, we're still working to finalize the schedules, but you're not going to want to miss this year's Focal Point, April 14th. Confirmed speakers are Rick Brumback, he's from Freed-Hardeman, Dan Winkler. Dan Winkler just left Sunset and gets to come to Focal Point in San Marcos. Michael Height, and let's just go on, Bill Burke. Bill Burke is on staff at Brown Trail. Mike Vestal from Bear Valley, I believe, if he's still over there. And Eddie Parrish. Eddie Parrish is the preacher at the Brown Trail congregation. Sam Dilbeck, Drew Leonard, Eric Owens, Steve Higginbotham from East Tennessee, Dale Jenkins and Jeff Jenkins, they're going to be there. And look, who do you have? Dan Winkler, Rick Brumback, Dale Jenkins, Jeff Jenkins are coming from the school that Richard Massey said is damaging the church. So you guys can't just be mad at us. Richard does not support what you're doing. There's a load of people, and honestly.
Did you say Jeff Jenkins is on the board at Freed-Hardeman?
Yeah, you said that a bit
he's
ago.
On the board at Freed-Hardeman, and Steve Higginbotham has been on Affirming the Faith, y'all. We've lost count of the people from Pepperdine that have been on Affirming the Faith at North MacArthur Church of Christ, where Tim Lewis is the preacher. Just lost the count.
Oh yeah, and so here's my thing when we say this, this is Richard saying Freed-Hardeman is damaging the church. Well, San Marcos, Wayne Jones, and Sam Dilbeck are bringing all these Freed-Hardeman people in. This is where someone says, Caleb, you are making it impossible to maneuver. No, I did not start these colleges. I did not come up with all these different lectureships. Again, I have to ask the question, y'all act like you're gonna die if you don't have the lectureships. And well, we need the lectureships to fortify the church. Do y'all do any door knocking during these lectureships? It's like, are we expecting lost people to come in? Lost people have no clue when you say, we're having a lectureship over here. What? This is like, Southern Baptists having their convention? We don't know what this is. You're doing the us few nobody knew. And like we already said a couple of days ago, people were more concerned about what's going to happen to the Spiritual Sword lectures than they were.
The Get Well congregation,
Yeah.
the Church of Christ that met at Get Well and Done for all these years. What's going to happen to it? What's going to have the Spiritual Sword lectures? What's going to happen to the Spiritual Sword
Paper?
Y'all, here's the thing. I know a lot of people wonder, why can these people not die? And I'm saying us. People will not let us die. If we lose funds, countless times we have lost major blocks of funds, and you know what happened? Individuals out there who say the church is headed in the wrong direction pick up and start sending us those funds. And you know why they send the funds? So that we can do stuff like this? This is a side act. Is it not?
The fellowship?
Yes. This is not something we enjoy. We're doing this around Freed-Hardeman. We're doing this around
Let me just say this.
PTP.
When we get done with this conversation, I still have an hour.
Yeah, you're gonna make a hard turn.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm saying I'm going to be talking to lost people in the local
Right.
community, and
And-
so that's the main scene.
Wednesday, I'm basically told about going into an area that's 150 miles away from here by ourselves. That's why people won't let us die. Who else is doing that kind of evangelism? On television, there's 3 congregations in that area, Caleb. They
That they
will
don't have
not
it.
lift a finger.
So-
They wouldn't put out the fire if we caught on fire. And I'm saying literally, those people cannot stand us. And one of them is actually having Tri-City School of Preaching, where you went to school.
Wesley Simons.
Wesley Simon. They're still using Wesley Simon's students and Wesley Simon's instructors
Now-
on their lectureship.
Here's the verse that we both use when Dad said, we have lost chunks of support and people won't let us die, and that is the Lord's providence. These are people who are concerned about moving in the right direction. And so 2 Chronicles 25:9, Amaziah said to the prophet, what shall we do for the hundreds of talents that we've given to the army of Israel? And the man of God said, the Lord is able to give thee much more than this. And so this is basically our placard. We have faith and trust in God that just consistently He'll take care of us. But I do want to attach this note.
He'll do that for y'all too.
Right. And I believe that. I'm not looking for God to eviscerate any of y'all. Like, I'm not saying, may the Lord strike him dead as he drives down 81. No. We love you. We just want to have the corrections. Now, I will say this on this passage. When you said we've lost bulks of support, I tell you what we don't lose when we lose support is viewers.
Oh.
The people who cut our support keep watching. They keep using the material, and they never have a problem still asking for help. They have this moment where they say, I'm done with you, until they need something. And then what do? We help them.
We help them. And you can just mark it down. Also, J. Lockhart will watch this. How many people have watched Alan? And we said the numbers a while ago, but I'm just saying, you have people telling you all the time that they're watching the things that we do, and we're trying to help the cause. When you really get down to it and people talk behind the scenes, especially older people, what do they say? Somebody actually got into it with a preacher's meeting last week, called Caleb up and said, I mentioned it, we need to be doing what they're doing in Virginia. And one of the preachers ended up saying, well, Caleb wasn't hard on Ruba Shelley. Is that pretty much how it went?
Right.
And it's like, wow, boy, what a switch. usually they're saying they're too controversial, and some of them even say we hate the church.
And so my response when the brother asked me about it, he said, we're in this meeting, and one of them said, well, I saw his interview with Rubel, and he wasn't very hard on him. And my response to him was, I said, I went to see B.J. Clark at C Street in Elizabethton to ask him about all the bad fellowship. And I said, you know what everybody did when I did that? And he said, what? I said, they all got mad at me. And I said, so what do you want me to do? And then also, too, it's like, that was what I said about, what you're quoting is not Michael Wyatt. Mm-hmm. But Michael Wyatt did say, he admitted he didn't watch the Rubel interview. He said, but I heard you didn't go very hard on him. And then as I'm going in the room to interview Alan Hires, he says, be good to him. So it's like, BJ gets special treatment? That's another thing about where I say I'm not doing that stuff. So we have this for the people, and the next person that I'm planning to interview, he probably is not going to think that I'm too conservative. So it's like, if he is going to want to beat up on me, I doubt it, but it's like if he wants to do that, then that's part of the candid Christian conversations. It's like we want to get down to what these real issues are, like you said. Well, we're saying it's behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So we want to have it on the table so we can really look at
and
it.
We're being lenient today. We could be showing you a whole lot more about people that were saying things about behind the doors.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am going to have some in the comment section. Because, we have to think about this too, like you said a moment ago. Let's give Richard some room. He's 15 years older than you, and he's had cancer. And let's say this too, again, just for people who don't know, and you didn't have anybody in your family that had cancer. When you go through chemo, it zaps you, right? Like, you're a different person, okay? No one wants to just be overly hard. I don't want to be overly hard, but I also don't want to just be absolutely inconsistent. And you have to start thinking about what you're doing to your students, whether it's Bill Burke, or it's Kenny Gardner, Richard Massey, or Eddie Parrish, or Kevin Rhodes. Andrew Patterson has, I guess he's a grad, Brown Trail affiliations. And this is what he said on the comment section about Richard Massey and the like button. He says, hitting the like button is not a statement of fellowship. I've liked plenty of things, various reasons. And then he said, but I knew the recipient would understand what part I was liking versus not. And then he says this about the Freed Hardeman speakers. As far as the speakers, I know literally nothing about any of them, and I'm not there, so it doesn't affect me. I have no opinion on their lineup. I don't think I would have any interest in listening to Pepperdine professors. So I have to say this, Brown Trail, Bill Burke, Richard Massey, the different ones, and it's Jason Rollo. When I brought up Pepperdine, Jason Rollo said, I don't know anything about them except it's a school in California. When I brought up Tulsa Workshop to Wesley, he said, I don't have a clue what they do down in Tulsa. You're feeding that to your students, and they graduate from your school and admit their ignorance. I literally know nothing about them. Maybe you should not be preaching. Like if you're just out here saying, this stuff I know nothing about fellowship, when loads of our lectureship books were on fellowship. He says, I have no opinion on the lineup. He doesn't mind. If you don't have an opinion, when you hear Pepperdine is there, you have an opinion.
You have an opinion.
You don't mind that they're there. You're fine for Pepperdine to be there. So that's Andrew Patterson. And this is what you guys are doing to your students. You're doing your students a massive disservice. Your students are paying the price for your politics. Here's Tyler Hill. This is what he said about Richard Massey. He says, I would call Richard a personal friend, and this is a public comment, I am aware that that already discredits me as a witness, but I work with Richard closely every day, and I think it's fair to say he is among the most conservative brethren that I know. And he said, which would include me, Caleb. And he says, we have all liked Facebook posts, on and on and on, but this is what he says. It may have been a good idea, let's scoot over a little bit. It may have been a good idea to ask Richard what he knew about Freed Hardeman and the lectures. I could have told you that it is close to nothing. I told him most of what he knows about the lectureship. This is the opinion that the students have of the faculty. He knows next to nothing about any of this stuff. And that's what you want in the school? You want the faculty. What's the point of having schools of preaching if you're not going to say we're leading the charge? But instead what we have is schools of preaching where all the faculty always claims ignorance and then the students admit it. He knows next to nothing about any of this. This is not good.
So can I make a danger?
I guess.
At this point? you heard Jay Lockhart say, I don't know anything about a cappella, and pretty much he was dismissing Keith Lancaster's influence. Do you know where Keith Lancaster is today? Anytime you get online and you see a congregation that has gone to several persons singing in the front, sometimes women, a lot of times women, they're actually up directing, there's more than one song leader. Can you mark it down? Keith Lancaster is actually calling himself a musicianary. And excuse me if I don't know how to pronounce all those syllables. This is just a made-up idea. He is actually training, and he has praise and harmony, and it is really going wild. And you might say, well, I've never heard of that. Can I tell you this? Don Blackwell and Aaron Gallagher are just at the hip, joined at the hip with the congregation, that one of the elders and his wife, they go to Keith Lancaster's event in Dallas, Texas, North Richland Hills, not the North Richland Hills Church of Christ that's now called the Hills, but Legacy is over there, and I would say that Richard knows who Legacy is, and they have Keith Lancaster on site, and that congregation was actually talked to, not Legacy, but the congregation that I'm mentioning about Don and Aaron. Matt Walling is a member there, and they said, go by and see him at the Freed Hardeman lectures at the booth. Listen, these folks have admitted that they were there, put it up on their Facebook that they were there, put it up that was great worship with Keith Lancaster while they're jumping around, snapping their fingers, waving their arms, shaking, literally jumping around, dancing while they're leading the singing. And it's all online. Those are things, while you say I don't know anything about it, they're taking over the church.
Right. And, that's to the statement of Don Blackwell said about people like Jeff Jenkins. He said that, I don't use Jeff Jenkins and those guys.
And would you say that if you couldn't prove it?
Well, I've already put it out.
Okay.
I mean, the last time we were on, it was already there.
Yeah, I'm just saying that for our audience.
Right. Yeah, we have it. And but here's my thing. He says, well, I don't use Jeff and Dale Jenkins. Well, 25% of PTP lineup is at Focal Point or Freed Hardeman with Jeff Jenkins, and that's someone says you're making it impossible. The church would survive without the one day of door knocking, that house to house, the annual day of door knocking, PTP, annual day of door knocking. We will survive without the bloated lectureships and all of their problems. And like Dad just said, while everybody is doing this and they're having a good time, we all know this is a good time. They eat, they see their buddies. Very little work is happening there. And meanwhile...
Speaking of eating, that's what the elders and his wife actually said to Matt Walling's wife when the statement was put out, see them at the booth. They sent not a private message, a open message, where are we going to stay and what are we going to eat?
Yeah, and every preacher that you ever hear at these things, I've been staying with so-and-so and they're feeding me. And even John Shannon says that these people don't know how to do anything but eat. Eat, eat, eat. So you're using the problematic people. You're the ones who created all these bloated things, bloated events, and there's no evangelism taking place. Let me have this one too. Why are these people not having more debates? There are so many things that, we could just have guys that are experts on this. We could have a dude who's an expert on Romanism and just be out there trying to get that. When I was sick with my colon, right before COVID, I had a Romanist from up north wanting to debate me on sprinkling and maybe a few other things. Why are we not having that? Presbyterians, I'm trying to get a Presbyterian to come on television with me. Presbyterians, Romanists, just on and on and on. There's so much that we could be doing. These guys are not going to be having debates unless they're debating something with a person who's already a Christian and it's just something that they're fighting about. So one Brown Trail student says, I don't have an opinion. Yes, you do. You don't have a problem that Pepperdine is at Freed Hardeman. And then Tyler just says, look, Richard knows next to nothing about what's going on at Freed Hardeman. That's not great. And I say, even from the 90s, Richard knows. Even if Richard didn't keep up and he's just relying on what was going on in the 90s, he knows.
It's still there.
It's still there. What you said a moment ago, Ralph Gilmore. Now, then, here's my thing about the like button. People keep telling me in the comment section that the like button is nothing. Well, it doesn't mean anything that Richard hit the like button. Richard himself said, I didn't mean to do it, and I wouldn't have wanted to do it. If it doesn't mean anything, why does Richard want to clear that? Richard then just full on comes out, I didn't mean to hit the like button, and Freed Hardeman has left the truth, and he said they're hurting the church, and you still got these students trying to argue against Richard, the like button doesn't mean anything. This was the next statement. I said, look, I would like to have a moment where the people are saying that a like button means nothing to notice that Richard just admitted that he did not like the post on purpose, meaning to Richard, a like button means something. And then Tyler Hill uses Latin, argumentum ad verecundium, my friend. And then I just, that means you're appealing to an irrelevant authority. And I just said, the man you're defending just admitted that I was right. He didn't mean to like it. And then he said, I don't want to like that. And then he just says down here, again, apply specific. Tyler Hill says, it applies specifically to using an irrelevant authority in argumentation. This is odd. This is odd that we're working together, and Tyler says, this dude knows next to nothing, and his opinion on it is irrelevant. Well, he taught you at school. He's a brother in Christ. One minute y'all are running to his aid, like when I put him on. These young guys all come running to his aid. But then when Richard actually says, Caleb was right, I wouldn't have wanted to like that on normal circumstances. Well, the man they were defending 5 minutes ago, now they're dumping as a no next to nothing irrelevant person. These are those moments of politics. It's like, how did we turn that fast? Instead of one moment, Richard is this honored older man who taught us in school, but once we found out, oh man, he actually agreed with what Caleb said. Well, now he's irrelevant and knows next to nothing. So this is not great, guys. And then this is basically what Tyler concludes with. Concerning liking something, and where I say doing a disservice to your schools, look, guys, we got to do better with our thinking. Does interaction on social media constitute biblical fellowship between brethren? I never said that, right? But here's the thing. If Richard had meant to press the like button, does that not mean that he likes it? Even if Richard had meant to press the like button, that doesn't mean he likes it. Liking something is the whole point of the button on Facebook. And then Richard says, no, I didn't do it. And then the Brown Trail students are trying to say, like doesn't even mean like. Bill Clinton, what does is mean? Yeah. And this is why I say down here, is that what we want to teach at Brown Trail, that words have no meaning? To like something is to approve something. And the students just act like they don't know. So let's close out these couple thoughts. This one really has to be seen. I put this on Facebook. Richard clears himself, fantastic. The students then start fighting against Richard, wild. And then out of nowhere comes Bobby Valentine. Bobby Valentine is a longtime Pepperdine speaker. And when Bobby Valentine sees my post that there are 3 Pepperdine speakers at Freed Hardeman lectures, plus 2 Sunset speakers and a Red River Encampment speaker, this is Bobby Valentine's quote. Let's see, I'll zoom in.
No.
Here's what Bobby Valentine comes in. I am delighted Freed Hardeman has grown in grace enough to know that fellowship is created by God and not a list of make-believe positions on the latest hot-button issues. And I tell him, thank you, Bobby. And I liked his comment because he's proving my point. Pepperdine loves the new Freed Hardeman direction. Absolutely. They are thrilled to death. You know why? They would love to sink their teeth into Henderson. It is just more freshman student body. Let me tell you, Malibu is way prettier than Henderson. That's all this is. Freshman class. Y'all all sleep behind the wheel, and these guys are getting your freshman class. So, Pepperdine loves what Freed Hardeman is doing. Richard Massey said, I am opposed to what Freed Hardeman is doing. And then the Brown Trail students started fighting against Richard Massey.
And y'all, last year, Pepperdine actually, now the campus congregation, has a piano. I'm saying, how can you possibly say, Alan Hires actually said that a person who goes to Pepperdine and doesn't speak out, that doesn't necessarily, and you can finish that because there's nothing you can actually say that cleans that up. They were with women preachers. Did they have to say something? Not necessarily. Well, can I ask you this? Are they not promoting what's going on over there if they're not at least saying something?
You look back at the lectureship books, everyone's going to say, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, these are the things that everyone used to agree on. You got the books in your library. I know that you.
What better place to say something than in your lesson? While I'm here, would it be that hard? While I'm here, I'm opposing that piano that's in y'all's campus congregation. on campus. I'm opposing Don McLaughlin's daughter, Amy, and I'm opposing Don. Really, would that be that difficult? Especially when people are going around opposing right and left, Ruba Shelley. They don't have any problem with that. Why would they not say a few of these things about these places?
It would be really easy. And the thing, too, about it is, one thing to let's make a distinction here. We're talking about saying something openly, like you just said, in your sermon, because what we keep hearing is they say, you don't know what I say. And it's like, I don't. Behind closed doors, you're right. I have no clue what you guys, like, you're just talking trash at that point. Let's close the door and talk trash. We're saying, why can't you, like, put it down, say it out loud? You got Facebook. And let me say this, too. Well, someone says, I don't want to put out the church's dirty laundry on Facebook, as if you have non-Christian friends on Facebook.
And what about this, too? Everybody's saying it's an attack. Earl Edwards and Tom Childress basically heard what we're doing or whatever, and they told Micah, well, it's better not to attack them publicly. What is an attack?
Yeah, so...
You know, we're basically doing here what is good for you, and this is not an attack. You called me up, want to talk? You can believe I'm going to talk to you. If you want me to come and see you, if it's possible, I'll do that too. This is not, I don't know where you get, this is just one of those tactics, is it not?
Oh yeah, it's a smoke screen.
They attack me. Have y'all ever seen Andy Griffin where they faked a robbery to keep Andy in town? And, you know, it was the barber that got...
It's an assault. He hit me real hard.
He hit me real hard.
Well, two, for Earl, so I'm being totally honest, right? What you said earlier, you watched this and you asked me, you said, is it enough to make you leave? Y'all, the fact that Earl Edwards and Tom Childers could say, well, we don't want to attack them. What is the reputation of the Church of Christ amongst the sectarian groups?
The Church of Christ used to be known as a walking Bible, and
Well,
they were definitely going to tell you what you're talking about now.
They would say they're the only church going to heaven.
Yeah.
So
They used to know that.
Yeah.
They don't now.
And so my thing is, I don't know how y'all can say, like when you go out and you tell someone they're going to hell, but then I can't say anything of correction to my own brethren. That is absolute hypocrisy. I want nothing to do with that. And, you know, another flip it around. Did that make sense? We tell these people that we don't come in contact with, y'all lost and you're burning in hell. But then when you look at your brethren, it's an attack and it's hard. This is odd and confusing to me. Let me go backwards. No one had a hard time jumping on my thread. Mm-hmm. Hey man, you owe Richard Massey an apology. Hey, don't do that to Richard. Why? No one said a thing about Pepperdine speakers on Freed Hardeman, except for the one dude who said, I don't care. I don't care if they're there. Why do y'all act like y'all have zero avenues to get anything done? You got a mailbox. You got an email address. Most of y'all have podcasts. You could liven your podcast up by hitting on something.
Milton Sewell told me that when he saw the mail on his desk, if it was about even, then he felt like he had done his job. How difficult would it be for people to write in and say to folk at, you know, I know for a fact that Glenn Colley wrote to Freed Hardeman when his first child was going to Freed Hardeman, telling them what he expected and what he thought. This is my most precious commodity, not commodity, but whatever you would say. Why couldn't you just go ahead and, I mean, you know they're watching this. You think that David Shannon doesn't see what we do? I mean, we put a banner up in front of their school on the county line, and it basically depicted what they were doing with their art book, and they changed the art book. They pay attention. Why couldn't we just follow that up and you just say, and you don't have to be caustic and hard like we are, as you say. Just go ahead and say, we see all these Pepperdine folk, Pepperdine speakers that you're lining up. You know, what are y'all wanting us to do? Or you want us to start sending our children to a state school? Because if we continue to send them to Pepperdine, guess what? They're going to be inclined towards marrying somebody from Pepperdine. Why don't they get married to a Pepperdine people? They got all these speakers coming out here from Pepperdine. Why wouldn't some of the parents say, you know?
Which that's essentially what you're saying right now. A friend of mine said that is the only reason that Freed is still in business. Like he said, it is a secular school that masquerades as a religious institution. He said the only reason that people are sending there is because they want their kid to marry somebody. But he said if it weren't that, that would just be...
And it used to be that they were going to marry somebody sound.
Yeah.
And so how many friends do we have that actually went to Freed and then they married somebody that wasn't sound,
Well,
and they're not sound?
you get the same thing. When I was at Tri-Cities, you know, we were always butting heads. At the end, it wasn't always this way, but at the end, I mean, I was getting called into Wesley's office all the time. And he just said, yeah, I've been trying to tone you down the whole time, been trying to tone you down. And it's like, man, you got one student who's knocking doors while I'm there. And, you know, I get out, you know, that you talk about some cognitive dissonance, because for Wesley, he's trying to tone me down at the same time, like, giving me the skills to do the debating. Wild. Yeah, but, you know, and I would say this too. I think that's real cognitive dissonance. I can imagine that, you know, when C Street was having a problem with me and they supported the school, Wesley told me that too. He said, hey, if they're going to try to like pull out on me because of you, he said, I'm going to tell them go suck a lemon. And that was his line all the time. Well, I'm not mad, you know, but it's the politics of it all.
Well, I patterned my television broadcast, just if anybody asked, after Wesley Simon's radio broadcast, which was called Arise to the Truth. I heard it one time, and I said, if I ever have a broadcast, it's going to be like this. What was it? Live, call in, give it to them straight and plain, and there's no telling how many people obeyed the gospel as a result of that.
Right, and he has a number of stories that would be very similar to your stories.
And doing what we're doing right here.
Yeah, yeah. Now that you're saying that, so look, you can get these. I have one of these from the late 80s where Wesley Simons in Johnson City, Tennessee, Wesley Simons and a handful of other people were buying newspaper ads just to tell the Christian church, we don't like that y'all are bringing Rubel Shelley in here. They paid money to put it in a newspaper where non-Christians could read what they're saying we shouldn't do right now. So everybody used to be doing what we're doing right now.
And you know, you could make David Brown feel good. David Brown has loads of these full sets.
Yeah.
Maybe not the full set still, but loads of
Close to it.
This is Contending for the Faith, in case you don't know, Ira Rice's paper. Make an older man feel good, worthwhile. Write to David Brown, Spring, Texas Church of Christ, and ask for your free copies of Contending for the Faith. You will not believe the people that you will read in there that are still alive and influencing the church today. And they have not changed one whit for the good.
They got a lot of them. I've seen them in a whole other side room. So I've said this a number of times, but you know, we just keep getting closer and closer to filling that hour. Now let's do it this way. Let's say it this way, and you can say it's fictitious that we're ever going to close. Who has changed? Okay? From the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Dad, we were walking out the door the other day. I quoted something, and he said, that was so long ago. And I said, late 90s? And then he said, late 90s was 30 years ago. You get that? I was talking about when Ira Rice died. Early 2000s, 24 years ago. So you're looking at the 80s, the 90s, and 20 years ago in the early 2000s, and we're asking this question again, who changed? Because one time when Dad and I came on and did this together, we had all these figures who had come to Martinsville, Virginia area and had participated in the door knocking and the tent meetings, and they hosted What Does the Bible Say, like Brant Stubblefield and Steve Wiggins, just wearing it out on What Does the Bible Say. Brant Stubblefield brought 2 15-passenger vans from Lindsay, Oklahoma. Michael White and Rick Popejoy. Michael White brought a 15-passenger van from Fort Worth. Huge. We loved it. And Michael White, again, I want to say this too because I've been quoting Michael about the whole Rubel and Allen thing. I asked Dad, because I was a kid back then, and I asked Dad within the last year, I said, could Michael, during the tent, I said, could Michael preach to lost people? Because not everybody can. I said, could Michael preach to lost people? And he said, oh, yeah. He was doing a great job. And so, I mean, we're at this moment exactly again. We had this moment earlier today in the afternoon about Richard on Facebook. Richard cleared it up. I'm happy. And we let, his statement come out here. Hey, I didn't mean to do that, and I think Freed Hardeman has left the truth and they're hurting the church. All that's cleared up. That's great. But now we're asking the question, though. This is from Brown Trail Archives. And this is the open forum at the Brown Trail lectureship. Let's just call it late 80s or early 90s. And who is that? It's Richard Massey. Dark hair. And then beside him is Gary Summers. And they're having panel discussion. What are the limitations of fellowship? I don't have my book in here with me tonight, but y'all, this is a testament to, what's his name? James Bales. James Bales said, shall we splinter? And he started talking about just the different ways. And most of the people who were with Brown Trail and the Denton lectures, they're not together anymore. Loads of people from Florida dropped out. Loads of people from, Memphis to Alabama. A lot of division. But what they were talking about here, and people were informed on, the limitations of fellowship. And so how has it changed, and who has changed? Is it possible that Gary Summers and Richard Massey are doing some changing? Did Dad change? Late 80s, 90s, and even 24 years ago in the year 2000. It used to matter. And you'd come in and have a whole panel discussion. They're going to inform you. But now the consistent answer, whether it's directors, instructors, and the students alike, I don't know anything about that. That's becoming the reputation, the people who just say, I don't know anything about that. And so we have this, and it's just not, let me find it. This is 2017. Who has changed? 80s, 90s, early 2000s. This is, you can see this is a letter, and it's directed towards Alan Webster in 2017. And
give the places Alan Webster actually stands in.
Right now?
Yeah.
So Alan Webster...
And was then too.
He is the then I wouldn't be able to do it, but he is the editor of House to House, Heart to Heart. He's currently an instructor at the Memphis School of Preaching, and the overseeing congregation of polishing the pulpit has been, is it Huntsville, Alabama, or Jasper?
It's actually Pass.
Okay, he says
Jackson.
Pass. Would it be connected to Allen?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
so
absolutely still lives there in Jackson, I believe it is.
He basically has feet in polishing the pulpit, House to House, and Memphis, and he spoke at Freed this year. We'll talk more about that. So all these different places where he would, and he'll be at, look, Alan is all over the place. And what you have in 2017 is a letter from Gary Summers asking him about why are we turning a blind eye to fellowship? How is it possible that in a window of 7 years, apparently Gary thought that Alan Webster was already having a fellowship problem, but now, 7 years later, in the last year, Gary told Dad in an email, I don't keep up like I used to. Well, who's changing then? And what changed to where people just said, I stopped looking at it. And this is an interesting email. Gary says, or this is a letter, he says, at least one student from Bear Valley has been defending Patrick Meade through social media. Really? One of his recent attempts to pervert the faith is found in document on women in worship and ministry. The list could go on and on. And Gary Summers lists Pepperdine and just on and on. Phil Brookman, and did you know that was in there? Jay Lockhart. So Gary was on Jay Lockhart in 2017. Who's changing? Dad isn't changing. I'm not changing. I'm in it, but I have to say this. As I've been going along, my eyes got open to a lot of stuff, that I just couldn't know as a young 20-year-old fresh out of school. But it's like, as I keep seeing it, I know I don't want this for young guys. Just moved every 2 years. Just loads of the politics, y'all. And so when we do this, nobody is upset with anybody. And I don't know. I was going to say I don't think that Richard would think that. But I don't know what people think.
No, I don't really think so. We're saying enough that you start basically, as we said, you kick those memory banks into play. And the last time I talked to Gary Summers, last back and forth discussions that we're having was in August, and he was basically saying, then I don't know as much as I used to. He said the brethren here don't know anything. And, it becomes difficult to keep up. But, these actual discussions, these broadcasts, they're filled with information. And I'm saying you can pass them around, or you can look at the material. I think we're hopefully we're giving some background to where these things can be found,
Which one?
the different things that we've been showing. I mean, that letter is,
We can.
Yeah.
Like if it can be accessed through his papers catalog,
yeah.
then I can put that in the description
and I would
box.
pretty much say that that letter that Gary Summers sent to Alan Webster is likely in his spiritual perspective lineup.
I would imagine.
Yeah, so
So a lot of this can be listed and linked. And, even what they were saying back here in this discussion, what's funny about if you watch this with Richard and Gary, the fellowship talk, they'll probably still be talking about all the people we're talking about right now.
yes,
And that's just
absolutely.
the cycle of people who had been withdrawn from and then they got back on the inside is wild. And so we are basically at a 13-minute point, and so it's an appeal not only to truth, it's also an appeal to historical landmarks, and we do want to appeal to emotion. And so we have great kinship and commonality, and there's just this idea. Virginia is not this is what a lot of people say, it's this geographic oddity that you've been able to do a number of the things over here that you've done. I had a young guy talk to me about they were trying to do a tent meeting in Texas, and what he basically was calling poor turnout was not poor turnout, but just by Texas standards. And I said, man, Virginia is a whole other world. We have loads of states that are not like Texas and Arkansas and Alabama that would just be saturated. And we need to start thinking about that. Like, we're producing all these guys, the number of guys that we are producing at a school, and we need to start thinking about branching out instead of leave school and get on a lectureship and try to just go back endlessly, and also getting on meeting circuits.
Well, we can give, as far as somebody just maybe 2 weeks ago, I told you that a gentleman texted me and wanted to know what size tent that he needed for 150 people. He was having a debate with a Muslim in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, somewhere in that, or Antioch or Murfreesboro in that area. These things can be done. And, brethren over was it Granbury Street where they had the tent? I know it was. It was the brethren at Granbury Street. Clark Layton, Kenneth Helms, elders over there, they had a tent meeting. It's been several years ago. It was before Hanley actually disbanded. But, they had a tent meeting. Rick Popejoy knows how to do that. Brand Stubblefield knows how to do that. And, we were supposed to have one at Portland, but it was the same as they were going to have it in the time frame of the 2016 election period, and they decided not to have it. But these things can be done. There are people that are still doing those kinds of things, and we're talking to you tonight, but we would have, somebody say, well, they wouldn't have anything to do with us. You would not believe the amount of people, as Caleb said a while ago, that still contact us, want to know. A guy from Florida asked me today, as a result of my broadcast last night, well, what kind of material, what can we do when I'm door knocking? In order to interest people or to get something going. One of the first things, Caleb, is be planning to do it. Because when you're planning, when you're thinking about doing door knocking, thinking about it being evangelistic, guess what? You'll see things, brotherhood things, you'll see different things while you're thinking about it, and your mind will attach itself to it. If you don't ever plan to do something, if you're never thinking about it, when things come by that could have been a major event, you will not actually be magnetized toward it. I told Caleb an account today about something that I mentioned last night about looking for people like Paul had found in Acts chapter 18, verse 5. It's a man named Justus, and the thing that was said about Justus, and a lot of times, we don't look at these stories, these accounts, and say, I'm going to find out what I can know about that particular account. Well, Tyler was using Latin a minute ago. And, if you're going to use Latin, how about use some Greek? Punch the button on all you have a computer or you have a Bible program on your phone, hit the button that for the interlinear and see what's in there. When it says that Justus was a worshiper of God, it actually is the word sibome, which actually means that he revered God, he feared God. It's oftentimes translated, those that fear God. When Paul was talking to persons in the synagogue, he would say, men and brethren, and those that fear God. It's that word. That's what Justus was. He was a man who feared God. We're talking about that today. Were we talking that earlier before the guy called me on the phone?
Yes.
And so, a guy...
it basically was on the heels of door knocking
Right.
talk.
That's right. We were talking door knocking, and I told Caleb, I said, I'm definitely going to be looking for persons when I talk to them at the door. I'm going to try to get it out of them I'm going to try to, basically figure it out in my own mind. Is this a person that really fears God? Are they giving me a bunch of baloney and just talking all kinds of craziness and know it all? That
Right.
type. Is this a person who really fears God? They revere God and they look at God as a superior. When we open the Bible, they're willing to hear what the Bible says. Get a phone call and a guy starts talking to me about having a difficulty in his life. And when I was talking to him about giving him money, he was talking to me about money, and I'm not going to give somebody cash. And I said, we're not going to be giving you cash. Oh no, I'm not going to be asking for cash. He said, I'm not going to be trying to get money out of religious people and then not use it for the right thing. Oh no, I'm not going to be doing that. Well, what you might say, yeah, I'm sure he said that. No, he had this worked out already. He came in here with a letter proving that, in fact, funds that were given to him were actually being written to the place that he owed, which is his power bill. What did he ask from us?
$20.
$20. He could have gotten $50 from me easy once he started telling me that he was not wanting cash and that, in fact, if we'd make the check out to through the power company.
Yeah. And you're grilling him, and
Yeah.
I'm saying, you're just trying to get the story and even see if he can keep the story. I have had so many people hang up on me.
Yeah.
Like you start asking them, what'd you say this was again? And
Yeah.
you say, well, 5 minutes ago it was for this. And then click, and it just all the way through was solid. And, he told you, I recently lost work. This is what I'm up against. I've got this much to go. I'm just trying to keep essentially my heat on.
While you were going down to get a Bible and a muscle and a shovel, he told me, he said, I said, how's it going? He said, really the walls are starting to close in. And come to find out, he had been in junior college here in this area, and he knew two of the sisters that attend here. One of them was a teacher over there at the community college. And I'll give a shout out for her, Sharon. He knew Sharon, and he just couldn't say enough about what a good teacher and how kind she was. And so what was that story about? We were talking about the kind of people that we're going to be looking for. Persons who, that guy impressed me that he was not about to take advantage of religious people. Boy, that is an oddity. It used to be the case that people would say, God, strike me dead. I'm not stealing from a church. I'm not lying to a church. Man.
Well, enough of them realize the church is stealing from you.
That's exactly.
So why not?
Exactly.
Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen.
So be looking for these opportunities, and you'd be surprised. Make it up in your mind the kind of people that you're looking for. Think about the kind of things that someone like that would respond to, and start thinking about a tract or some information to give out. If you can't figure it out, here's somebody that can write the tract for you, and we would make the tracts for you. How many tracts have we given out to people out of here?
Right, I don't know. Loads. But that was the thing, too, of we have done that, but I will say this for guys, you'll never get any better if you don't start. Like writing your material, and also you talk to these lost people and you start thinking the way they need to hear it. It's like you're going to go in and start talking to these people who've never heard some of these things before, and you've been through 2 or more years of school. You're going to have to present the truth and what you've said about doing mission work in foreign islands. If you're bringing it where everybody can understand it, then that's where you want to be. And I say this too, some people who are bad writers choose to be that way because they want to talk over everybody's head. One other part about it was, I wanted to say this too, with someone who says, you guys get on here and do these talks, and they say, what do you think you're accomplishing? Well, let's hold our horses for a moment on these interviews. These interviews are only like 3 months old. I'm saying, can we give it some room to do its work? And we're going to see how it influences people down the road. And I'm saying, to be honest about the politics is that point. But then when we start having the fellowship discussions and the evangelism, because there was 2 things you said in there, I was just told yesterday that a preacher in Oklahoma had been asked to be on Affirming the Faith. And when he was asked by Tim Lewis, he said, can't do it. And he said, well, why? And he said, I can't be on with these other speakers. And now when I heard that, I said, hey, at least he vocalized, right, this is what my problem is. And I said, but it also would have been okay if he went ahead and went. And while he was given a time slot, say, hey, guys, I almost didn't come, and here's why. So that's a note. And maybe someone says, you don't know that you influenced him not to go to North MacArthur and Affirming the Faith. Maybe not. I don't know anybody else who's talking about it, like what we said at the beginning.
Well, you got a call from somebody that's telling you that he didn't go. Why
Yeah.
did he tell that person?
Oh yeah, it's like he's moving it around.
Yeah.
And then the other one was from someone else, this evangelism discussion, and Dad said, you know, as you think about these individuals who do fear God, and they want to do the right thing, I heard from someone else, and they said, you know, we just did the house-to-house, heart-to-heart with Rob and Nicole Whitaker, and they said, you know, we were beefed up and pumped up for about 6 weeks, and then we kind of just puttered out. And so when you immediately, once you said, start thinking about talking to people, my then note was, and get ready to do a lot of it.
Yeah.
Because it's like everybody wants Acts chapter 2, where the thousands of people are obeying the gospel, but they don't want the 3-year ministry plus John, which was hard-hitting work. So, you know, you're just going to have to have stick-to-itiveness and also be thinking about your local community. And that's another thing, like people say, and it's clearly in the Bible, but they're talking about lectureships in schools. I've had young guys say to me, Caleb, you ought to love the brotherhood. Okay, you ought to love lost souls. You know, how do people come into the brotherhood? Someone's got to reach out and give them portions of the gospel that they need to hear and work with them. So nobody, as we finish this out, nobody hates anybody. We love you, older men. There are things that I say in conversation to him where I have my perception of what I get to see, and what I get to see is basically what I read or what interactions I have. But a lot of time he will come in and he'll say, well, no, based on his interaction, he'll say they treated me very well. They helped me get with these other people. They helped me out very, very much. And so, you know, if he can help me see those things, then I almost always try to say, then I'll try to adapt that into my perspective. But we're not up here just cutting folk up.
Well, while you're talking, I'm thinking about the school. You know, I went to Memphis School of Preaching, and on one occasion I was asked by Curtis why I didn't come to the lectureship. And, you know, what I thought that I could do for the Memphis School of Preaching is basically what Paul was saying about the money that was sent to him in Philippians 4, 15 through 17. He said, I'm trying to make this abound to be fruit to your account. That's what I thought about the Memphis School of Preaching. I was trained there. I was influenced by good, godly men who had experience doing tent meetings. They told me stories about, that caused me to have an RV today. And you might say, boy, that's a great story. You got an RV, huh? They told me about the opposition to the truth that they were putting out. They would come and tear their songbooks up and cut their ropes. And I made my decision then that I was going to have some form of being able to stay on the site or have somebody stay on the site so that we wouldn't have those kinds of things. You know, I was ready for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be discouraged by somebody cutting my ropes and tearing up our songbooks.
And you have had Pentecostals threaten to burn your tent down.
Absolutely. And so I'm saying those men taught me they were doing that kind of thing in the 50s. I have men old enough that were actually in the 50s doing those kind of things. They knew about those evangelistic times that encouraged me. And I have tried to go out and do likewise, and that's my contribution to the Memphis School of Preaching. And the fact that they end up having me, regardless of how they're behaving, they have me out here praying for them, being concerned about them. And you might say, you don't pray for the Memphis School of Preaching? Are you kidding? You think I just spit? I don't have any spite for these folk. All the good that they did, they actually helped me help him, encouraged me to go overseas. My teachers were guys that had been in the mission field as well. I think about them and pray for them on a regular basis, and then I just keep on doing what they trained me and encouraged me to do. And we're going to be doing that from now on. And so some of you guys, don't allow yourself to be told that we have this just, you know, some kind of hateful feeling towards all these brethren. No. These broadcasts are hard work. Getting this information, hard work. Both of us are working with new machinery that we're having to get used to. It would have been much easier not to do this broadcast tonight. And man.
And people who are watching on YouTube don't actually recognize. They only watch an hour. We actually were having a whole nother hour before this. Do you get that?
2 hours? I have no idea what time it
We've
is.
been in here 2 hours, but you guys only saw one of them. So the note is you actually need to check back on YouTube within the hour or hour and a half, and then there will be a whole nother hour.
Caleb's baby is very sick. by the way. And so you talk about the tension associated with that kind of thing for the last 3 days. He was sick again, 10 days ago as well.
Yeah.
And so, we're right in the middle of, as you heard us say last night, trying to start a broadcast again in another area that's 150 miles from here. And this is, why did we do that? We just weren't doing anything. We said, we'll just get up here and hammer on Richard Massey. Listen, Richard, if you hear this, I love you.
And I thought it was just a good moment to where Richard said it. Hey, let me get that on the table.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was wonderful. So this evening, we love you, and we hope it's informative, and we would like to be able to see more of it.
And to Tyler, I cannot tell you the stories that Caleb has told me about your dad. I carry a Bible that your mother rebound. We have great concern and emotion, love towards your family, and we're praying for y'all.
I had just maybe a week or two ago mailed him a book, and so none of that changes. Like none of the feeling changes. It's just if it's a moment of disagreement, it's a moment of disagreement. So everybody who's been mentioned, love them. People who aren't mentioned, love them. And we're just trying to do the best that we can with the truth in our conscience, and we're asking everybody else, are we all doing that? The truth in our conscience. So thank you. Keep asking, what does the Bible say? God bless you. Good night.